Well, we now move on to consider the topic of double pawns or even triple pawns. I don't have any clear feelings about this type of pawn structure other than to say that in general double pawns are a weakness. Yet you will find many players deliberately go into positions with double pawns and in some cases are happy to accept them. A classical case very early on in the game can be seen in the exchange variation of the Ruy Lopez, where black literally encourages white to double his pawns. In return, black has two bishops and the possibility of fluid play in the middle game. So I think we can say that if you inherit double pawns, certainly the opening phase of the game, then you have to be doing it for a reason. You have to have a clear notion of where your compensation is coming from for the double pawns. It's worth pointing out that usually when one or other side inherits double pawns, there's a half open file next to those pawns, so that can often be used to gain some activity. I mean, another classic case of this would be, let's say that the Caro-Kann defence, where black employs the Nimzowitsch variation, knight takes f6, g takes f6. Using classical yardsticks, you know, you'd have to say that black has a horrible pawn structure. But there are dynamic advantages. Number one, black can use the half-open g-file as stated. And number two, he can bring his pieces out very easily and effectively. Number three, yeah, there's a possibility that black might play e5 somewhere in the middle game and liquidate those double pawns. So all these types of things encourage strong players occasionally towards double pawn positions. The longer the game goes on, the more pieces that come off the board. Clearly, double pawns become more of a weakness. And it becomes even more acutely important with the pieces being traded off for you to have some clear idea how you're going to get rid of these double pawns or how you're going to use them. My first example is complex and very interesting. It's a game from the Tata Steel Masters, where Zay played in 2014, between Sergei Karyakin playing white and Richard Report playing black. Karyakin, of course, one of the world's very best players. Report not far behind him, a young man, graded 2-6-9-1. And this was another one of those opening variations where white voluntarily accepts double pawns early on. It's the French Winawer. White prods the bishop on b4. Black takes off the knight, saddling white with double pawns, and now queen to c7. So why would either player go for this position? Well, white likes the dynamic advantages of this position. There's a possibility to attack g7. In fact, white zeroes in on that pawn straight away. And there certainly is a clear vision of using the bishop pair. And in particular, this dark square bishop could become incredibly strong as the game progresses. That's now the piece black doesn't have. You often find it in the Winawer, if white can activate that bishop successfully, then the whole black position collapses like a house of cards. From black's perspective, well, black initially has got to defend himself, and certainly against queen g4. But later on, there are hopes of battering the white pawn structure. You know, these pawns in the centre, if they can become blockaded, then black has good chances too. So all in all, in the Winawer, we get a very unbalanced struggle, which suits both players if they're going for the win. Now, queen to c7, okay, that seems to set up a threat of c takes d4, followed by probably queen coming into c3 check. White intercepts that by threatening something of his own. Black can't ignore the threat to g7, and Report chooses f6, which is about as combative as it gets, and it justifies the position of the queen on c7, because as we can see, the queen on c7 now protects the pawn. f5 has also been played and leads to a more static position. So f6, knight comes out to f3, and black blocks the game down with c4. We can label that move consistent in that, you know, black is trying to fix the pawn structure, fix the double pawns, so he can surround and win them a bit later on. But of course, this does give more scope for white to activate the bishop on c1. For instance, if he could play a4 and then bishop a3, cutting a knife into black's position, this is already a very good location for the bishop. Nevertheless, Karyakin presses on with h4. A typical move in this type of position, gaining space on the king side and possibly planning to get the rook out via h3. Black plays knight c6, and now white drops his queen back to protect e5. F takes e5, knight takes e5, knight f6, and now white activates his bishop via f4. Well, clearly there are dangers to black in this position, and you can see them. They're visible to the naked eye. But I'm not sure I understand now why report didn't go knight h5. That seems to me a very good way to get a decent position. Left to his own devices, when white moves the queen, black's going to chop that bishop off on f4 and get rid of public enemy number 1. If white tries knight takes c6, then black recaptures. White has to move his queen, and now the main point of this manoeuvre, knight h5, is just simply to get the dangerous dark square bishop off the board. Perhaps report didn't go in for this because he didn't like being left with a bad bishop, locked in behind his own pawns. But after queen a4, it seems to me black has good counterplay, because he's mounting an attack, a critical attack, against the white pawn structure before white can use the advantages of his position. For instance, if white goes queen d2 here, then black castles with a nice active game. If he goes king d2 here, we go rook f8, and I think the same thing happens after king d1, rook f8, queen g3, bishop d7, and then castling on the queen side with a nice active position. This is the type of thing they aim for in the winner, and it simply leads to a very unclear situation. Going back to bishop f4, these are the choices that make a difference in games. Report decided to play queen a5. Knight takes c6, b takes c6, and now Karyakin tries to make maximum use of his advantage in this position, the dark square bishop, by hitting the black queen. Queen comes to a4, eyeing c2. You can already see this is a very complex and heavy type of position. And now king to d1, a reciprocal inaccuracy, as it was shown after the game that queen takes g7 was a more critical idea. Once again, this is so thematic, it's hard to imagine that Karyakin would reject this, because black is being attacked on the dark squares. Rook f8, bishop e2 now, pinning black down. I mean, black would like to play knight e4, but that runs into bishop h5 check. So he's probably got to gobble some pawns. And now rook h3. Very good. Bringing the rooks into active play. White is fully mobilised in this position, and I fear for black's safety. Basically, black's not using his queenside pieces here. He's got extra material, but yeah, I think white's going to kill black on the dark squares here. So anyway, yeah, it just goes to show you, it gives us all hope when strong grandmasters don't play the absolutely best move. King d1, black castles, pawn up to f3, preventing knight e4, and now a very good move by report, e5. So suddenly black is right back in the game. Quick sip of chess-based coffee to celebrate the move e5. Black's threatening to bring this bishop out to f5 and get the initiative himself. So suddenly, Karyakin's got to be very careful. He took with the bishop. Black played bishop f5, and now a slightly clumsy move by white, rook a2. But it's what they do in this situation. You know, if you go rook c1, then black can certainly consider just lopping off this pawn. And what's to stop black in this situation from marching his a pawn all the way down the board? So rook a2 to keep his a pawn. Black played rook f7. White went bishop e2, and now knight d7 by black, again trying to get rid of public enemy number 1, that dark squared bishop. But I think rook e8 in this position is just a nice move for black, aiming to get all the pieces coordinated after rook e1, bishop g6. If bishop f1 here, we can go queen b5. That threatens a very nasty check. And if king d2, we go rook fe7. This seems to me, with knight d7 coming up now, to be a good way of marshalling black's forces. Well, it is noticeable here, of course, that both sides have now got a set of double pawns on the c-file. So knight d7 was answered by rook e1 and rook e8 by f4, and this is the main difference between this particular variation, the one last displayed. White gets the chance to anchor his bishop in the middle of the board, and if black takes it off, then the bishop's replaced by an incredibly strong passed pawn. So black's got to manoeuvre around this bishop now, which is not at all easy to do. Report moves his knight into e4. White takes it, he doesn't like it there. And now we reach an opposite colour bishop middle game where the initiative is going to be of key importance. Karyakin presses forward with h5. Black does not like that pawn coming to h6, so he stops it. King d2. Somehow, to win this game, White's got to free up that rook on a2. Queen comes to b5, pawn to a4, queen to b7. White pushes on, and again black stops a rook's pawn from advancing. Queen to g4 was answered by queen to a7. And it doesn't look like an enormous amount is going on in this position, but White has got a very clear plan at his disposal. He's got a kingside pawn majority here. He would very much like to push that up the board to create an attack against the black king. So White's plan might be, in ideal circumstances, to move the queen, to play g4, and then to go g5. And if we just drop, well, we're actually in the critical position. If we say that black plays bishop f5 here, we can see this plan in action right here. I quite like this for White, who's building up a really good initiative on the g-file. In the game, black played queen a7, and the instant that queen moved off the b-file, White seizes his chance. Rook b6, rook c8, and now rook e b1. So over the last few moves, this has become uncomfortable for black. White has strong control of the position. Not only is White controlling the open b-file, putting pressure on black's queen side, he's also got in the wings this other plan of playing g4 at the right moment. Black, meanwhile, seems to have a nice position, but he's got nowhere to go with it. He has no corresponding opportunities to blow open the game. Instead, he's got to try and probe White's position with his queen and hope that something turns up. Rook to b7. Well, the computer suggests that rook 1 b4 is the most accurate, with the point that if queen takes a5, the queen drifts offside, and only now does White close in with rook b7. But Karyakin plays rook b7 immediately. Queen comes to a4, staying in touch, hitting c2. Rook comes to b2, protecting. Now there is an interesting line here. If White allows black to take on c2, which looks possible, then queen e3 is excellent. And the point of that is that if bishop takes b1, queen e6. But now black has the excellent move here, king f8. And suddenly the tables are turned. Not only is black threatening b1, rook e8 or rook e7 are other possibilities. So going back to the game itself, that's why White protected c2. Rook takes b7, rook takes b7, queen takes c2 check, king e1, queen c2 check, queen c1 check. It looks as though both players are in time trouble at this point in the game. Queen takes d3, c takes d3, pawn up to g4. Bishop e4. Well, black couldn't take the pawn because of rook takes g7 check. So g4, even in this simplified position, is a decisive move. Bishop e4. f5, shutting out the bishop from the defence. c5, black's got to try and find counterplay from somewhere. Rook takes g7 check, king f8, and now pawn up to f6. Black played rook c6, and the last move of the game was the careful king e1. Just monitoring black's d-pawn and cutting out any tricky possibilities. Rapport resigned. Well, this was a very complex example of the type of position that double pawns can promote early on in the game. And it was a heavyweight struggle all the way through. Suffice it to say that Probably in this game, Rapport didn't get the counterplay he was looking for, but as we've seen back in the opening phase of the game, after bishop f4, he should have played king knight h5.